At the age of 84, I had genuinely come to accept that pain was an unavoidable part of my existence. I viewed it as an inherent aspect of aging, an uninvited partner that I had no option but to tolerate. For more than 10 years, pain had made a home in my life, subtly yet unrelentingly. It first appeared in my knees, traveled to my hands, and eventually established itself in my back. This was not an intense, sudden pain that would make you scream. Instead, it was a low, incessant ache, the variety that gradually erodes your resilience. It was like a permanent shadow. This shadow accompanied me into every space, with every movement, every effort to maintain a normal life. My movements became more deliberate. I became more tentative. I experienced fatigue, not only physically, but deep within my soul. I consulted physicians. I attempted therapeutic treatments. I swallowed medications with complicated, unfamiliar names. I applied topical creams, adhered to exercise plans, and even heeded every well-meaning suggestion from my loved ones. Yet, nothing provided a real solution, not in a permanent manner. One evening, after a day filled with ache, I sat in the quiet and thought, perhaps this is simply the sensation of growing old. Perhaps this is my reality from now on. I was on the verge of surrendering. Then a shift occurred. Something unforeseen, something minor, something I had overlooked for years at the back of a kitchen shelf. Turmeric, merely that, a common spice. But what it offered me was a result I never anticipated. This is what I wish to tell you about now. Not only the formula, but the entire journey. Since if you are hearing this and you are weary of pain, weary of striving, weary of believing, then this account could also be meant for you. The unseen pain. In my case, the pain started subtly, merely a slight twinge in my left knee. When I went up the stairs or rose from my preferred armchair, I would reassure myself, it's unimportant, just aging. However, as time went on, it intensified. That minor twinge transformed into a severe, persistent throb. Then it expanded, first to my right knee, then to my hips, and soon after affected my hands. Abruptly, everyday actions became challenging. Operating a doorknob, gripping a utensil, fastening a shirt. Upon waking, my fingers felt as if they were not my own, rigid, clumsy, and unfamiliar. I avoided minor chores, not due to a lack of motivation, but because I dreaded the pain they would provoke. Even walking, an action I had performed my whole life without a thought, began to feel hazardous. I caught myself scrutinizing the floor with each step, anxious about tripping, about causing more injury. Sleep became elusive. Some evenings I remained awake for hours, tossing and turning, seeking a posture that was pain-free. Occasionally, I managed 2 or 3 hours of sleep. Other nights, I just watched the dawn. And when morning came, I felt no improvement. In fact, I was often more drained than the previous day. That type of relentless pain is largely invisible to others. They may notice you moving more slowly or needing to sit down more frequently, but they cannot sense what you sense. They are unaware of how it exhausts you, not only on a physical level, but on an emotional one as well. I recall one day gazing into a mirror and hardly knowing the person looking back. I appeared weary, not just in the years, but from bearing the burden of perpetual discomfort. And most tragically, I had begun to resign myself to it. I had started to be convinced that this was simply my fate. That moment of looking at myself and seeing a person who had nearly surrendered remains one of the most sorrowful memories I possess, because despite having attempted every remedy, despite having followed all the correct procedures, I was still in pain, still anticipating, still wishing, and yet some profound part of me was not prepared to quit. Not entirely, not at that point. When you endure pain for a sufficient time, you start to seek alleviation anywhere possible. That described me. I attempted every option available. I began with basic, non-prescription painkillers, pills that guaranteed quick relief. Initially, they appeared to offer minor help, but the benefit faded fast. My physician subsequently recommended more potent anti-inflammatory drugs. I consumed them warily, constantly concerned about their potential effects on my digestive system or my kidneys. I did not desire to exchange one issue for a different one. Next came the lotions and ointments. I would massage my knees each night with menthol or capsaicin base creams, hoping the feeling of heat indicated a positive effect. Some nights I would picture the pain diminishing, but by daybreak it was invariably back. I also started physical therapy, which involved mild workouts, stretches, and manual therapy. I obeyed every direction precisely, attended every appointment, and honestly, there were periods when I experienced slight improvement, but it was never sustained. A few days later, I had returned to my original state. I read periodicals, internet posts, any information I could find. I inquired with friends. I experimented with supplements bearing names that were difficult to say. Some were packaged in vibrant containers. Others appeared more organic. Whenever someone claimed, "This worked for me," I gave it a try because I needed to believe that some product, any product, might also work for me. But on every occasion, the pattern repeated. A tiny flame of optimism was followed by the letdown of the actual outcome. I started to feel I was moving in a loop, pursuing a relief that was perpetually just beyond my reach. Then arrived the day that transformed it all. It was a calm day. I had been seated for the majority of it because my legs refused to support me. I gazed through the window and felt a profound sadness that was deeper than the physical pain. I was exhausted. Okay, then, as if life had been anticipating that specific instant, my niece called me. That telephone call marked the start of something I could never have predicted. The shift. That call from my niece happened at the perfect moment. Her name is Helen. She resides in a different town, but we speak frequently. She is the type of person who pays close attention, even when you are speaking sparingly. On that day, I shared my entire situation with her. How I had hardly managed to walk for more than half an hour the entire week. How my knees were throbbing. How I had tested every solution I could imagine, and nothing had been effective. I was not sure what response I anticipated from her. Perhaps just understanding. But instead, she was silent for a second and then posed a single, straightforward question. "Uncle," she said softly, "have you ever considered using turmeric?" I literally chuckled. I informed her that I possessed a container of turmeric in my kitchen, one that had likely been there for a decade. I recalled using it on one occasion for an Indian meal, but I had never considered it as a treatment. "Research it," she suggested. "I am not suggesting you abandon your current therapies, but it could be more beneficial than you think." After we ended the call, I simply remained seated. Turmeric, a culinary spice. It seemed overly straightforward, almost foolish. But later that night, having nothing to sacrifice and with a small glimmer of interest ignited inside me, I took a seat at my computer and began to research. I started with general online pieces. Then I discovered scientific research papers, discussions with medical experts, and testimonials from individuals across the globe. They all discussed this vibrant yellow root employed for millennia, not only in cuisine but also in wellness practices. In India, it was referred to as a golden powder. In China, it had been utilized for various issues from arthritic pain to stomach problems. Even contemporary Western science was starting to acknowledge its value. What astonished me the most was the uniformity of the reports. Turmeric was not a supernatural solution, but it was effective, particularly when used correctly and over time. I discovered information about curcumin, the bioactive component within turmeric. It was characterized as a potent anti-inflammatory agent, not the type that temporarily hides pain, but the type that genuinely assists in soothing the underlying source, persistent inflammation, the very same inflammation that had been smoldering quietly in my joints for years. One statement from a doctor remained with me. He stated, "Turmeric is not a miraculous solution, but it is one of the most comprehensive natural anti-inflammatories available. When used regularly, it can create a significant impact." That was the instant I experienced a sensation I had not felt for a very long time. Hope, not frantic, anxious hope, but a calm, rational hope. The type that suggested it's possible, just possible, that this might work. So I got up, I went to the kitchen, and I located that old container of turmeric, still there on the shelf, waiting for me. That evening, for the first time in many years, I felt inquisitive again. And at this stage in life, curiosity is more than an emotion. It is a motivation to continue. The potency of turmeric. So, what precisely is turmeric, and how did such a commonplace item become something that impacted my life so significantly? Turmeric is a rhizome, or a root. Its appearance is somewhat similar to ginger, but it is smaller and has a brilliant golden yellow hue that colors anything it contacts. The majority of people recognize it as a spice used in food preparation, particularly in Indian cuisine. However, for thousands of years, turmeric has been utilized for purposes far beyond taste. In ancient medicinal practices, such as Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine, it has long been honored as a potent remedy for health. Within turmeric lies a unique element, an active substance named curcumin. This is what provides turmeric with its distinctive color and its innate therapeutic strength. Scientific research has demonstrated that curcumin assists in lowering inflammation within the body, and that was a precise detail that captured my focus. You must understand, inflammation is not inherently negative. When we sustain an injury or combat a sickness, our bodies generate inflammation as a healing mechanism. That form of inflammation, known as acute inflammation, is temporary and beneficial. However, when inflammation persists for an extended period, even without an injury, it becomes chronic. And chronic inflammation is a condition many older people experience, frequently without knowing it. It can manifest in numerous forms: stiff joints, persistent tiredness, mental confusion, swelling in the extremities, pain that appears without a clear cause. Over time, this low-grade, persistent inflammation deteriorates our muscles, joints, and even our digestive and neurological systems. And often, we are advised to treat the signs with drugs, topical applications, or relaxation. But curcumin functions in another way. It does not merely conceal the pain. It actually addresses the origin of the problem. It helps inhibit the specific proteins and biological mechanisms in the body that allow inflammation to remain active. And most importantly, it accomplishes this in a mild manner. It is not severe like certain pharmaceutical drugs. It does not cause stomach discomfort or lead to reliance. Rather, it assists the body in gradually, consistently, and naturally regaining its equilibrium. What I also discovered is that for individuals our age, this mild action is particularly crucial. As we age, our bodies become more delicate. Certain remedies that were once effective can unexpectedly create more problems than they solve. However, turmeric, when used appropriately, honors the body's natural rhythm. It collaborates with the body's processes, rather than opposing them. I once read a description that has remained with me. It stated, "Turmeric does not function like a hammer. It functions like the sun, warming you slowly, healing you quietly day after day." This resonated deeply with me and provided the assurance I needed to try it myself. Once I comprehended how turmeric functioned, I made the decision to try it. But I did not want a complex process. I had no desire to purchase expensive components or adhere to a confusing wellness craze. I simply wanted an uncomplicated preparation, something I could create at home using items I already owned. So I looked for a fundamental recipe, something natural and mild. After reviewing different approaches, I discovered one that suited me. I call it my golden cup. Here are the precise ingredients I used: 1 flat teaspoon of turmeric powder, a very small amount of ground black pepper, just a pinch, but this is essential. I will clarify why shortly. 1 cup of unsweetened plant-based milk. I use oat milk, but almond milk, rice milk, or even regular dairy milk are also fine. Half a teaspoon of coconut oil. If you do not have coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil is a suitable alternative. A tiny piece of fresh ginger, grated. This is not mandatory, but I suggest it if you enjoy an additional layer of warmth and taste. To make it, I follow this procedure. 1. I measured 1 cup of milk into a small saucepan. 2. I added the turmeric, black pepper, grated ginger, and coconut oil. 3. I placed the saucepan on the stove over the lowest heat setting. It is crucial not to let the mixture reach a boil. I stirred it gently with a wooden spoon to combine all the ingredients. 4. After approximately 5 minutes, when the liquid was hot and just beginning to steam, I turned off the burner. 5. I poured the mixture through a fine mesh strainer to catch any bits of ginger or undissolved turmeric. 6. I allowed it to cool for a moment and then drank it slowly, as I would a cup of tea. The flavor is robust and warm. The turmeric provides a deep, earthy taste. The ginger introduces a subtle spiciness, and the oil gives a smooth texture. You can include a small amount of natural honey if you prefer a sweeter drink, but I consumed mine without any sweetener. There was a certain solace in its simplicity. Now, here's a critical point. That pinch of black pepper is not merely for taste. Black pepper contains a substance named piperine. Piperine enhances your body's ability to absorb curcumin, the therapeutic component in turmeric, making it up to 20 times more effective. Without it, a large portion of the curcumin would pass through your body without providing much benefit. So, even though it is a minuscule quantity, never omit the pepper. Initially, I made some errors. I assumed that using more turmeric would produce faster results, but the flavor became overpowering and it upset my stomach. Using a larger quantity is not necessarily superior. The true secret is regularity. It is not about the amount you consume in one sitting, but about how faithfully you consume it over time. I also attempted to prepare it in the microwave on one occasion, but the result was uneven and it lacked the serene, soothing quality I experienced from preparing it slowly on the stovetop. There is a unique significance in preparing it mindfully with your own hands. For me, it evolved into a small nightly ceremony. I drank it each evening before bed, replacing my usual cup of tea. It helped me unwind. It felt positive to know I was performing a benevolent act for my body. After so many years of waiting for physicians or treatments to repair me, I finally felt like an active participant in my own well-being again, as if I was contributing to my own recovery. And that, I am convinced, is itself a component of the healing process. I did not anticipate much on the first night. I had prepared my golden cup calmly, stirred it slowly on the stove, and sat at the kitchen table holding the warm mug. The aroma was earthy, almost like a memory, something familiar, yet long forgotten. I drank it slowly, not expecting a miracle, but simply giving it an opportunity. That night, I went to bed thinking, well, at least I made an effort. I held no specific expectations, only a tranquil feeling of inquisitiveness. On the second morning, something felt altered. I awoke in the same manner as always, stiff and careful. But as I walked to the kitchen, I perceived that my steps were slightly more fluid. My knees still ached, but the motion was less forced. When I stepped onto the front porch, I did not need to grip the handrail as firmly as I normally would. It was not a radical change, just a minor improvement, but it was enough to make me pause and take notice. By the afternoon, I felt somewhat more stable on my feet. I could walk across the room without supporting myself on the furniture. It made me question, was this because of the turmeric, or was it simply a better day? That evening, I made the golden cup again, this time with greater focus. I stirred it slowly, allowing the warmth to surround me, and drank it with a quiet sense of hope. The third day offered more encouraging signs. I opened the kitchen window that morning and realized I had not been massaging my fingers for 10 minutes, as was my usual habit. My hands felt more flexible, more responsive. I stepped outside and walked along the hallway without that familiar, heavy pressure on my knees. The stiffness was still present, but it was less intense. And more importantly, I was less apprehensive about moving. The fear that every step would cause pain was starting to diminish. I proceeded with my day cautiously, but with increased assurance. At one point, I bent down to retrieve something from a lower shelf and realized that for a moment I had done it without a second thought. There was no hesitation, no sharp pain to halt me. It was as if my body was gradually reawakening. Then came the fourth day. I remember that day vividly because it was the first time in a very long time that I experienced a sensation I had nearly forgotten. Peace. Not because the pain had completely disappeared, but because I finally felt a sense of agency again. I prepared my breakfast. I took a short walk around the yard. I even called my niece to tell her about my progress. She listened, then laughed softly and said, "You see, Uncle, sometimes what heals us isn't found in a pharmacy, but in our own kitchen." That night, I went to bed without the usual sense of dread, without that heavy anticipation of another night of discomfort. For the first time in years, I felt as though an internal shift was occurring, not just in my joints, but within my very spirit. It was not a miracle. It was not perfection, but it was a start. After those initial few days, something began to return that I had not even realized was missing: my own identity. You see, when you exist with pain for an extended period, you start to lose sight of the person you were before it arrived. You cease doing small things, not by choice, but because pain dictates every decision. It instructs you when to sit, how to move, and what to avoid. Gradually, without even being conscious of it, you stop pursuing the activities that once brought you happiness. But after I began drinking my golden cup each night, that persistent voice of pain began to recede. It did not vanish entirely, but it grew quieter. It no longer commanded every moment of my day. And in the space it left behind, something beautiful occurred. I started doing things I had not done in years. I began walking around the yard every morning, just for 10 or 15 minutes. But it felt like a homecoming to something I had deeply missed. The fresh air on my face, the sunlight on my skin, it felt like I was re-engaging with the world, not just observing from a window. I opened jars without clenching my jaw. I reached for my shoes without first steadying myself. I even cooked an entire dinner one evening, without needing to sit down and rest every few minutes. But more than the physical acts, I felt a lightness in my heart. I began to look forward to events again. I smiled more and I even laughed. That feeling of powerlessness, the one that had shadowed me for so long, began to dissipate. I was still 84 years old, but I no longer felt defeated by my age. Instead, I felt I had discovered rhythm, a way to live with greater peace, more comfort, and a renewed sense of purpose. And it all originated from a single cup. One simple cup, prepared with care, with intention, and with the belief that perhaps, just perhaps, my body still had the capacity for goodness. I was not seeking to regain my youth. I did not desire to be young again. I simply wanted to feel like myself again. And step by step, I did. Lessons I learned. In retrospect, I learned a very significant lesson. Relief is not always instantaneous or conspicuous. Sometimes it arrives softly, like a gentle wave. And when it does, you must be patient enough to perceive it. This golden cup did not transform everything immediately. It was not like flipping a switch. It was more akin to opening a window and allowing fresh air to circulate, little by little. The relief I experienced was not dramatic, but it was genuine. It was steady, and most importantly, it was authentic. I never discontinued my visits to the doctor. I did not discard my prescribed medications or ignore the medical advice I had followed for years. What I found was a beneficial addition, not a replacement. A complement, not a cure. Something that helped my body function with a little more ease, with less tension and less pain. Thank you for spending this time with us today. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and share one thing you learned and how you apply in your life. Your comments inspire us to keep going. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to Elder Wisdom Tips and share. Your support makes it possible for us to continue creating content that informs and uplifts. We appreciate you watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.